MTV was once known for the revolutionary idea of bringing music videos into your living room 24 hours a day. But a little over 10 years after the channel launched in 1981, MTV stumbled onto something that would completely change television forever and eventually reveal a much darker side of entertainment as we know it. By the early 1990s, MTV's original audience was growing older, and the network was struggling to keep viewers engaged with its traditional music video programming. So MTV began looking for something new. They came up with the idea of creating a young adult scripted nighttime soap opera that would be titled St. Mark's Place. The theory was that their typical demographic of 18 to 24-year-olds would tune in to watch people in their own age group going through various life experiences on television. MTV tapped Jonathan Murray for his documentary-making experience and veteran soap opera producer Mary Ellis Bunham to lead the project. But when costs were estimated to be around $500,000 per episode using traditional actors, writers, and scripted production, the idea was ultimately scrapped. Jonathan Murray proposed the idea of cutting costs by simply documenting real people instead of actors, while Mary Ellis came up with the idea of structuring and presenting their lives like a soap opera. Using real people instead of actors while eliminating many of the high production costs associated with scripted television drastically cut down the cost per episode to just around $100,000 each, while still meeting MTV's ultimate goal of reaching its young demographic target. And on May 21st, 1992, MTV's The Real World was born. It was at this moment that MTV created the modern reality TV show format that we have all become familiar with, and figured out how to turn regular everyday people into television spectacles and personalities in exchange for the possibility of fame and fortune. The new format worked brilliantly and fit in well alongside MTV's normal music video programming. MTV's ratings reportedly tripled after the premiere of The Real World, and the future of television as we know it was changed forever as a result. But the monster that MTV had created was much bigger than just one successful television show. As The Real World evolved over the years, alcohol and partying became increasingly central to the formula of the show. Remember, it's supposed to be a soap opera after all, and the one thing soap operas need is drama. The cameras were no longer simply documenting people's lives. They were documenting what happened to those lives when you put a group of young strangers together, gave them an unusual living environment, and let their relationships, conflicts, partying, and personal problems play out in front of millions of viewers. And this is where MTV's reality TV experiment began to evolve into something arguably much darker in nature. What began in 1992 as a simple experiment of watching a bunch of strangers living together in a house gradually evolved into a spectacle of extreme behavior, conflict, and dysfunction that could generate higher ratings. MTV eventually began to realize something very important, which was that the people on these shows could be just as valuable as the shows themselves. MTV's reality TV production wasn't just a formula for creating individual shows. It was becoming a remarkably efficient machine for creating an entire ecosystem of characters and personalities that could be reused, recycled, and monetized over and over again. Eventually, the network began creating spin-offs of The Real World, such as Road Rules and The Challenge. The same cast members who were now experiencing the fame and fortune they had been promised could be reused throughout different shows, almost like products coming off of an assembly line. For example, a person could become famous on The Real World, then appear on Road Rules, and then compete on The Challenge. And MTV could just recycle the same personalities over and over again for years. MTV no longer had to create a completely new cast of characters every time it created a new show, which drastically cut down on production costs. And they already had access to an audience familiar with the cast on the shows. And MTV would eventually use this exact same formula for its other hit shows, such as Jackass and Jersey Shore, both of which would go on to produce multiple spin-offs and recycle many of the same personalities. For example, popular Jackass spin-offs included Viva La Bam and Wild Boys. But this is where the story begins to get even darker, because MTV's gamble on reality television didn't come without a significant human cost, especially for some of the people who had effectively become products of their reality TV machine. In 2008, Joey Kovar from The Real World Hollywood openly struggled with alcohol and drug addiction while filming the show.
And just did like so much cocaine, did so much alcohol. And then like I come out here and it's like, boom, it's like, here comes a monster again, you know?
His behavior became so concerning that he left the Real World house to enter a 30-day rehabilitation program and later returned to the show. He went on to appear on Celebrity Rehab, where he discussed his ongoing struggles with substance abuse, including cocaine and ecstasy. Sadly, in August of 2012, Joey Kovar died at the age of just 29 years old from opiate intoxication. And unfortunately, his story is not unique in the MTV world. Ryan Knight, who was a cast member of The Real World New Orleans in 2010, developed an addiction to painkillers after a severe shoulder injury ended his hockey career. During his time on The Real World, his addictions became part of the storyline. Then, in November of 2014, Knight died at just 29 years old in what was considered an accidental overdose. In the year 2000, MTV changed the world yet again with the premiere of Jackass. With increasing competition in reality television, MTV was willing to push the limits even further in favor of higher ratings. And with Jackass, they were able to prove that not only could money be made from dysfunctional behavior, it could also be made from extremely disgusting and dangerous stunts. The original Jackass concept actually came from Bam Margera, who had produced the CKY video series, which became extremely popular in the underground skateboarding scene before eventually blowing up. Producer Jeff Tremaine teamed up with Johnny Knoxville to bring the concept to a major television network, and MTV took the bait. Jackass became a massive television success and went on to the big screen as well. And once again, MTV had created a group of personalities that could be turned into valuable television properties and recycled over and over again. This time, it was Bam Margera and his original CKY crew being thrown into the machine. Around this same time, MTV aired yet another hit show based heavily around on-air dysfunction called The Osbournes. The Osbournes became an instant success, largely because viewers were fascinated by the chaotic and unusual life of Ozzy Osbourne and his family. And once again, MTV had found a way to turn someone's real-life problems into entertainment. It was well reported during the filming of The Osbournes that Ozzy was heavily medicated on prescription medication and possibly other things during filming. Ozzy later spoke publicly about his heavy drug and alcohol use during the filming of The Osbournes, including his use of large amounts of prescription medication and periods of heavy drinking, reportedly drinking up to a case of beer a day. He also described the experience of having cameras constantly watching him as being a laboratory rat. His son Jack Osbourne also struggled with substance abuse during this period. Jack has openly and publicly discussed that he struggled with severe drug and alcohol addiction as a teenager while filming the series. He began filming for the show at the age of just 15 years old and developed a heavy dependence on alcohol, marijuana, and prescription pills, including oxycodone, before finally getting sober at the age of 17. Jack has maintained his sobriety since leaving the show, as did Ozzy himself until his death in 2025. In 2003, MTV spun off the hugely successful Jackass franchise into a brand new show that would be known as Viva La Bam. The show highlighted Bam Margera's extravagant and often dangerous lifestyle along with his friends and family. Many of Bam's childhood friends from the CKY era, such as Ryan Dunn, Rab himself, and Brandon DiCamillo, all came along for the ride. Bam was given a massive budget of $300,000 per episode to wreak havoc, travel, and just destroy whatever he wanted to while literally living his life like an MTV rock star. Bam Margera was no longer simply a cast member. It was his dangerous and dysfunctional lifestyle itself that had become the television show product, putting pressure on him and his friends to keep delivering on the chaotic lifestyle. Bam eventually developed serious problems with alcohol and drug addiction. Obviously, MTV cannot be blamed for Bam Margera's addiction problems, but Bam has publicly acknowledged that his problems with alcohol became significantly worse during the years following his rise to fame, and that the rockstar lifestyle surrounding his MTV career played a major role in the increasingly serious substance abuse problems he was suffering from. Unfortunately, Bam's struggle with addiction wasn't unique at all within the Jackass universe. Brandon Novak battled a severe heroin addiction and has publicly discussed having to leave the production environment to seek treatment.
But Nedges is clearly the new demon.
And perhaps most notably, Steve-O became severely addicted to drugs and alcohol, eventually leading to an intervention that helped to save his life. Steve-O's entire persona had become consumed with his ability to consume massive amounts of drugs and alcohol everywhere he went. Thankfully, Brandon Novak and Steve-O eventually found their way to long-term sobriety. Although nowadays, Steve-O just appears to be addicted to Blue Chews and money. Some of Bam's other friends were forced to eventually leave the show to save themselves from the chaos. Chris Rabb, also known as Rabb himself, was a member of the original CKY crew and has publicly admitted that he hit rock bottom with substance abuse during the filming of Viva La Bam and was forced to leave so he could recover from it all, which he eventually did. And Brandon DiCamillo, who was a major creative force behind the show, disappeared entirely from public life after appearing in 43 episodes, reportedly because he didn't want to be associated with the drug and alcohol usage going on at the time. Unfortunately, other members of the Jackass and Viva La Bam universe were not so lucky. Original CKY and Jackass crew member Ryan Dunn was killed in a fiery car accident in June of 2011, along with his passenger, Zachary Hartwell. Toxicology testing had found that Ryan was heavily intoxicated at the time of the crash, and investigators believed that speed and alcohol were major factors. Ryan was only 34 years old, and Zachary was only 30. It was a devastating loss for the Jackass family, and especially for Bam Margera, who had been one of Dunn's closest friends since their childhood skateboarding days. Another tragic figure from the Viva La Bam era is Bam's crazy uncle and personal accountant, Don Vito. Vincent Margera, better known as Don Vito, became instantly famous for the portrayal of himself as a clumsy, belligerent drunk character on the show, which of course was essentially his normal self. But in 2006, his television persona turned into a real-life legal nightmare. After an incident at a Colorado shopping mall, Don Vito was arrested and accused of sexually assaulting 2 underage girls. He was ultimately convicted of 2 misdemeanor counts of sexual abuse and sentenced to probation. He was also banned from portraying his character ever again, which effectively ended his career as the Don Vito character audiences had come to know from MTV. Vincent Margera was immediately removed from the upcoming Jackass movie that he had already been filming for. Then, he disappeared from the public spotlight afterwards and died in obscurity with a ruined reputation in 2015 at the age of 59. The Jackass franchise has not only been criticized for the dangerous situations assigned to low-paid cast members, but also for the lack of planning and safety during production. The 2022 release of Jackass Forever introduced a few new cast members, one of them being Sean McInerney, also known as Poopies. Sean happily joined the Jackass cast with big dreams of fortune and fame. Then he nearly died while filming a shark stunt before the film was even publicly released. During the stunt, Poopies was doomed by a slow jet ski driver and fell into the water below, where he was bitten by a shark and suffered severe injuries to his left hand. He was immediately pulled from the water and rushed into medical treatment that saved his life. The injury to his left hand was so serious that doctors were lucky to save it at all, but he ultimately lost significant function. And the incident raised questions about just how far MTV production teams were willing to go in the pursuit of higher ratings. Jackass producer Jeff Tremaine later acknowledged that the shark stunt could have been handled more carefully, but Poopy's tragic story didn't end with the shark attack. Shortly after the production of Jackass Forever, he nearly died from a fentanyl overdose after taking drugs that he had purchased on the street. He was once again rushed to the hospital for life-saving treatment and thankfully survived. To make matters worse, Poopies was reportedly only paid $35,000 for a film that went on to make millions. Some fans have directly criticized producer Jeff Tremaine for profiting from desperate performers whose lives involved serious substance abuse problems. Unfortunately, the tragic repercussions of MTV's reality TV machine continued to roll along with the creation of their next major hit, Jersey Shore, in 2009. And perhaps the most famous drug addiction story to come out of Jersey Shore is that of Mike Sorrentino, better known as The Situation. Sorrentino has openly discussed his severe addiction to oxycodone and other substances during the height of his Jersey Shore fame. According to public interviews, his sudden fame, money, and lifestyle surrounding Jersey Shore made his pre-existing problems with addiction dramatically worse. He has told stories about secretly sneaking drugs into Italy while filming the 4th season of Jersey Shore, and he has claimed that some of his bizarre and violent behavior on camera was actually influenced by drug withdrawal. In other words, some of the behavior millions of people were watching as entertainment was happening while Mike was dealing with a serious addiction behind the scenes.
Every time I went, there would be a 50-pack of Percocets or Rocosets underneath my eyewear.
Thankfully, The Situation ultimately won his battle against addiction. After years of treatment and relapse, he has maintained his sobriety since 2015. Later in 2023, he publicly revealed that he had spent more than $500,000 on drugs during the height of his Jersey Shore fame. The year 2009 also introduced a new, highly controversial MTV reality show called 16 and Pregnant. MTV topped themselves yet again by creating a show that documented teenage cast members who became pregnant at a very young age and highlighted their struggle with finishing school, giving birth, and managing care for their newborn baby. And just as expected, it turns out that throwing extremely vulnerable pregnant teenage girls into the reality TV ecosystem may not have been the best idea. Many cast members featured on the show and its spin-offs later suffered from serious problems with mental health, substance abuse, and devastating family tragedies involving themselves and even their children and their families, with some of the cast members not surviving the long-term fallout of their appearance on the show. Jordan Cashmere suffered from homelessness, addiction, and an eventual death from fentanyl and cocaine at the age of 26. Valerie Fairman suffered from legal problems and addiction and died at the age of 23. Autumn Crittenden died of a fentanyl overdose at the age of 27. Jessica Cunningham suffered from a heroin addiction, later resulting in an overdose, coma, and an eventual recovery. Amber Portwood suffered from domestic violence issues, addiction, and eventual incarceration. The tragic stories stemming from 16 and Pregnant are absolutely overwhelming. While most of the tragic cast outcomes from 16 and Pregnant occurred after their appearance on the show, it is well documented that the public pressure, scrutiny, and other long-term fallout greatly contributed to their problems. MTV has defended the show by claiming that teen pregnancy rates dropped as a result of it, which they attributed to a higher awareness of education and birth control. However, the statistics proving any significant drop in teenage birth rates has been determined to be flawed at best and more likely just coincidental. It's important to note that MTV has publicly maintained an anti-drug policy for its reality shows since the beginning. On The Real World, for example, cast members were reportedly subjected to drug testing, and failing a test could result in them being removed from the house. But alcohol was treated very differently. According to The Real World producer Jonathan Murray, MTV did not provide alcohol to the cast. However, cast members were allowed to purchase and consume alcohol themselves during filming. And as the years went on, alcohol-fueled partying became an increasingly recognizable part of the MTV reality TV formula. Some of the most memorable and profitable moments in MTV reality history involved people drinking, partying, fighting, hooking up, and behaving badly. And that's what makes the history of MTV's reality TV empire so complicated. The tragic stories associated with the MTV reality TV machine seem almost endless. In fact, there are way too many of them for me to cover in this video. The countless people who passed through the MTV reality TV meat grinder and experienced addiction, injuries, legal problems, or even paid the ultimate price later in their lives. MTV didn't necessarily create the dysfunction. It discovered that dysfunction could be profitable and how to capture it all as a product on camera. It also discovered that real people could be used cheaper than actors and willing to take more desperate risks. MTV discovered that conflict could generate ratings, that extreme behavior could generate even more attention, and that the personalities it created from the machine could be recycled into new shows again and again until they were no longer useful to the bottom line. And although MTV isn't directly responsible for the tragedies we've discussed, it's a stark reminder that the promise of fame and fortune can come at a very high price. Because when humans become a product, their downfall becomes profitable.
That was me really thinking I was talking to someone that I wasn't talking to.